Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on Dark Matter Radio. I'm your host, Miss Solaris BlueRaven. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and a special thank you to webmaster and producer Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is Steve Colbern. And Steve Colbern is a chemist and chief materials scientist with 20 years of industrial experience. He is currently working in the area of carbon nanotubes. Steve Colbern has analyzed several alleged alien implants that the late Dr. Roger Leir has removed from his patients and has uncovered startling findings. And his website is alienevidenceinc.webs.com. And please welcome Steve to the show this evening. Steve, how are you doing?
Doing great, Solaris. Glad to be here.
I'm happy to have you on board, and thanks for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you. And also, I am so sorry to hear about Dr. Leir passing, and I know you were close to him, so my condolences.
Yeah, he was one of my best friends, and he was my research partner for 6 years, and he was just a really great guy and a very intelligent man. He could talk intelligently about just about any subject, and he's well-rounded and very open-minded, and they just don't make people like that anymore.
No, they certainly don't, and I understand you'll be carrying the torch for his research pretty much. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm now the de facto head of his company, ANS Research, and I was the chief scientist for ANS Research before, and now I'll be taking over. And we have a general surgeon that's still on board with doing more removals if we get the funding, and so we're basically still in business. We just need to secure a reliable source of funding, and we're good to go.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Glad to hear that. Well, thank goodness he was here on this timeline to contribute to the assessment of alien implants. You know, that's a true benchmark in history regarding alien technology, if you ask me.
Yeah, it was very unusual to have somebody with his background willing to stick their neck out and actually analyze some of this data and present the findings. Any kind of UFO research is pretty much the third rail of science, where scientists will often get their funding cut and be blacklisted from publishing in journals for exploring this topic. I mean, look what happened to John Mack. I mean, he almost lost his tenure over investigating alien abduction, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing happens all the time. Behind closed doors, there are a lot of scientists that would like to investigate this phenomenon further, or various aspects of the UFO phenomenon further, but they're stopped because of the fact that they don't want to jeopardize their careers.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, really, when you think about it. There's the mainstream, and then there's the division, and then the black budget technology. You know, it seems to me like if they really want to pursue that, if I was a mainstream doctor, I would probably go into the black budget technology myself.
Well, I think that's what's happening. I mean, these third rail type things, so these taboos in science are to delineate the line between mainstream and black budget, and they just want the investigation of these phenomena that the government doesn't want talked about going on behind closed doors in black budget circles, and they basically get the really top-notch scientists to work for black budget projects, and the ones in academia are basically second stringers that are masquerading as our top scientists, and that's part of the reason for the lack of progress in physics in recent years. Right.
You know what's interesting that I see a lot of mainstream scientists kind of piggybacking off of mysticism. I see them researching a lot of information that's already been pretty much exposed by alternative media, and then saying, oh, scientists now discover this and they now discover that, when in fact it's been talked about for a very long time.
Well, yeah. Excuse me. I think some of the so-called mysticism is based on fact and was ancient knowledge discovered long ago during the last technological civilization that was here, and it's they have no better place to go in physics besides to explore that, because they're basically stuck. I mean, the string theory is a dead end, and I think they already have have had a unified field theory for years, but based on Tesla's work, but they're keeping it classified.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's
very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a disservice to everybody on the earth, if you ask me. But I do want to thank you for your research. You've done incredible work, and of course Roger, he was phenomenal also. You guys were both on the front lines, so everybody appreciates that, as you know. and he will be missed. But he's in a better universe, as I say. People transfer out and they keep ascending, and that's the good side of it, right?
Yeah, that's true. He was ready to go. He was in a lot of pain, and he had problems with his legs. He had vascular surgery on his right leg, and to get an ulcer on his ankle to heal. And he had the same problem on the other leg, where he dropped a book on his ankle, and it led to a big ulcer that didn't heal. And he was going to have vascular surgery on that leg, but had a heart attack before he could get it done. And he lived quite a long time for somebody with his medical history, I would say, and just fought till the end. And I really respect the guy. And he wanted to get his book done before he passed on, and he succeeded at that. And it just went to the publisher a few days ago.
Excellent. Well, that's a benchmark right there. A nice time capsule, right?
Yeah, and definitely. And I have yet to read it, but I hear it's really good and has a lot of our new data in it, and hopefully it'll get the attention it deserves. And I just want to say to you that all his inner circle of friends are really devastated by this. I mean, we really loved Roger and thought that he was one of the pioneers of this physical evidence research in the UFO field, and for some reason his research never got the attention, or our research never got the attention that it deserved. And I hope I can remedy that posthumously for him.
Exactly. Well, my heart goes out to you and everyone in his inner circle. I know he'll be missed. He will be missed, obviously, and he's already missed. But I am glad he has a book as a benchmark, and I'm glad you're pursuing, moving on with his data and researching and investigating.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be in this position. It was a great honor to have worked with Dr. Leir for the past 6 years.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you if you can kind of try to talk as loudly as you can, because your voice is kind of soft, but we'll work through it.
Okay.
There you go. That's better.
Right.
Whatever you're doing, stay right there. That's great. So, and also Steve conducted my implant analysis scan, which was filmed and is in my DVD documentary, Eye of the Remote, A Disclosure of Covert Technology, in DVD, if anybody's interested in that, and did an excellent job in assessing that technology. And Steve, can you talk about your most recent discoveries and research concerning alien implant analysis? What have you been up to? What's your recent findings?
Well, we just did a removal back in January of this year after a gap of almost 5 years, for something like 4.5 years. The last removal we'd done prior to that was 2009 with Mr. Ron Noel, and we removed an object in January 2014 from a man's leg who was a friend of Richard Shaw and L.A. Marzulli, who do the Watcher series of DVDs on this subject. And the object we removed was very similar to object number 15 and 3 or 4 other objects that were removed from Roger's patients. It was a cylinder with a ceramic-type outer layer and a tough gray conductive membrane on top. And there are carbon nanotube bundles, about 10 microns across, seem to be the main electrical connections to these devices. And those go from the metallic portion of the device to the gray membrane. The gray membrane seems to form spontaneously after insertion. And so they're not; these devices aren't all the same, but we found enough that are very similar to each other to know that we have there are some generalities to them. They're similar models, at least.
And how are they implanting people, would you say?
How?
Yeah. What's the technique?
AdvocT reports anyway indicate that they have a device that looks like a piece of 1/4-inch stainless steel tubing with a black handle on one end, and that it has fiber optics going down the interior of it, and has some sort of dispensing apparatus for implants on the end and a needle, and they put the device against the area of the body they want to implant, and the device automatically injects an implant and then exposes it to ultraviolet light, which activates that and the exposure to the bodily fluids activates the device, and then the outer layer, the outer ceramic layer over the metal, has enzymes or some sort of catalyst in it that causes the outer membrane to form using the body's blood plasma as raw material. Then the electrical connection takes place between the device and the membrane, and then nerve cells also grow into the device, proprioceptor nerves, and there's some sort of chemical cue in the device that causes that to happen. And then the metal in these things, by the way, is mostly meteoric iron, which that'd be kind of hard to explain how somebody got a piece of a meteorite in their body.
It's fascinating, and it sounds like the implant is designed. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, by any other, there's no other explanation other than somebody put it there. I mean, it's highly unlikely that somebody would get a piece of a meteorite in their body any other way.
Yeah, exactly, and it sounds like the implant is designed to mesh with the body. If you ask me, I mean, it's just it meshes quite well from what you're describing.
Oh yeah, the one unusual thing about these devices is that the pathology reports always every time indicate that there is no immune response to the objects by the body, and that's unheard of. Every kind of material that's implanted in the body should produce an immune response of some kind, and these devices are the exception. And this effect could be really be a boon to medicine if it could be reproduced in organ transplantation and such.
Right. And is there a volume on your phone, Steve, that you can turn up?
No, I don't.
Okay, just try to talk a little bit louder if you could.
Okay, I'll try to put my mouth a little closer. It's pretty close now.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And what do you think about radio frequency signature? Now, do these implants actually have a radio frequency signature, the ones that you just removed?
Yes, most of them that we've, the last 5 that we've removed had radio frequency signals. But we proved in the Ron Noel case that they're not always transmitting, so it's possible that the other ones were transmitting as well. But before object number 10 or 11, I'm not sure, Roger was measuring radio emissions, and that was before my time in the research. But I suspect that all of them give off radio signals at one time or another.
And what do you think is the signature itself? I mean, do you know exactly what frequency we're dealing with?
There's several frequencies. The devices, especially in the case of object number 15 at least, the device gave off an ELF, extremely low frequency signature, and a megahertz range frequency, and a gigahertz range frequency. The gigahertz range frequency was around 2.4 gigahertz. And there was a megahertz range frequency. I think it was 126 megahertz, and that's some kind of aeronautical or satellite communication frequency, which raises the possibility that these devices are alien. Perhaps the aliens are sharing the data with our government.
Right.
And Dr. Leir found that very interesting, and so do I. But the majority of the data transmitted by the device is most likely transmitted by the gigahertz signal, because that can transmit more information and has more of a scalar component. We suspect that the main power transmitted by these devices is transmitted in the scalar mode, because that type of a signal can be broadcast faster than light and also passes through material objects a lot better than normal transverse wave EM. And it was interesting that the ELF was there in the transmissions from object number 15, because the ELF can have an effect on the mind.
Right. Yeah, I've heard of the ultra-low frequency as well, and I tend to think that that's associated with the Black Space Program or the covert underground to some degree. Now, does this signal, or do these signals oscillate? You say they switch on and off. Does that mean that they're oscillating?
I wouldn't say they're oscillating exactly. They just so sometimes they're not transmitting, or at least we cannot detect a signal, and other times they are. The Ron Noel device seemed to be transmitting about a third of the time, for example. That was the device that was in Mr. Noel's wrist and was connected to the nervous system. That device's claim to fame was that the metal seemed to have less meteoric iron in it, but and more ordinary iron, but it was almost indestructible. Diamond tools would not cut the metal, which is something completely unheard of. I mean, diamond tools would cut any metal. It actually scared the machine shop operator. He thought it might explode or something.
Right.
But we finally ended up cutting it with a high-energy laser. I was starting to have my doubts that even that would work, but we wanted to cut it in half. The standard procedure to cut these things in half if they're not broken already from removal to get a view of the interior.
Mm-hmm. And how long did it take for you to cut it in half with the laser?
I wasn't there, but I don't think it took too long. Once it started, only about 30 seconds or so.
Okay, and that would pretty much stop the transmission once you cut it in half, right?
Yeah, the transmissions generally stop once the objects are removed from the body.
Okay.
The objects are also highly magnetic, and the magnetic field tends to decay with time once they're removed from the body as well.
Well, that's very interesting. So they'll stop transmitting as soon as they're removed. How weird, huh?
Yeah, I think it's probably because the nervous system provides signals that keep the device active.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. It's kind of like the Borg, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. In fact, abductee reports indicate that the Greys that do most of this implantation reportedly are a lot like the Borg, or they're a collective.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Perhaps with more individuality than the Borg individuals have, though.
And you all have been lucky enough to have you've been able to remove these things surgically, so that part's good. I mean, opposed to having it in a place or a location where you can't remove this implant.
Yeah, we've been able to remove implants mostly from the extremities. We have strong reason to believe there are implants in the brains of most abductees, but removing those would probably be extremely hazardous, and we've not attempted that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that one. What about a small electromagnetic burst, like electromagnetic pulse burst, to disable the technology? Would that work or no?
I'm not sure. If it were powerful enough, in theory, it should work. But the question is, would it also damage the body of the host?
Right. Yeah.
These devices are small, and we have reason to believe that the electronics are composed of carbon nanotubes, which are extremely difficult to damage by heat or any other means for that matter. And I suspect that the electromagnetic pulse would have to be large enough to damage the host to affect the devices.
Right, yeah, so don't try this at home. Right?
No, I wouldn't recommend trying it at home.
Exactly. Yeah. And insofar as the carbon nanotubes go, for people who don't know what these are, can you go into detail insofar as what is a carbon nanotube?
It was kind of a synchronicity that I found carbon nanotubes in objects number 15 and 16 because I work with carbon nanotubes in my day job. But at any rate, they are one of the hottest topics in material science right now. They're hexagonal arrays of carbon atoms, kind of like the one plane of a graphite molecule, if some people are familiar with that. And but instead of a flat plane of hexagonally arrayed carbon atoms, it's rolled up into a tube, and the chirality, the twist of the tube, and the diameter determines the properties. And these things can have either highly metallic electrical carrying properties to the point where they're almost semiconductor or superconducting, or they can be semiconductors. And so in theory, you could make carbon nanotube electronic arrays, and that's what's being experimented with now in our science. And the aliens have apparently perfected the technology and embedded arrays of carbon nanotube electronics in these devices. And that seemed to constitute the electronics of the device. There's not a lot of silicon or elements that would be conducive to our type of electronics in these devices.
Mm-hmm. And you would say that, considering some of the frequency signatures, it sounds like some of this technology is powered up by satellites. Is that correct?
I think the energy comes from the zero-point energy. Dr. Kuntz was saying that one of the signals we detected was a resonance frequency for the metal that when in conjunction with a phonon resonance can produce zero-point energy in his experience. So I think that's most likely where the power comes from. These things might be producing several watts of power, and the milliwatt signal we detected might be just a bleed-over transverse wave signal from interference of the scalar waves. One more thing I wanted to say about carbon nanotubes is that they're the world's strongest known material. So if you disperse them thoroughly in metal, especially single-wall carbon nanotubes, which these were, you would, in theory, get a very, very strong substance, composite, many times stronger than normal metal, and that's what the material appeared to be in the run-of-the-mill implant, a perfected carbon nanotube iron composite.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty incredible. And what year was that for that implant?
That was 2009.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. And what do you think the pulse is on the UFO community these days? Would you say that the implant induction activity has increased over this past year?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of activity reported. Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center was saying that activity had pretty much doubled or tripled over the past 5 years. There's been a lot of sightings reported, a lot more abductions than usual reported. So, yeah, I'd say it's increased.
That's really interesting. And can you explain to our listeners, for those who might not know, what exactly this abduction entails?
It's a lineage thing. The aliens seem to be interested in people with Germanic, Native American, and Celtic bloodlines for the most part, and they'll often follow families through generations, and they'll come and take people out of bed. They'll send some of their people in to get them, or either they'll walk them out, or float them out a window, or take them directly through the ceiling with a tractor beam, and they have the technology to pass right through a solid object. So I know it seems rather incredible to a lot of people, but we've actually reproduced similar effects in experiments down here using strong electromagnetic fields where objects will fuse into each other or pass through each other. And the aliens have perfected this technology. And they apparently use it to take people, and they take people up to their craft and take medical samples, do training with them, and a lot of people that get contacted frequently are helping with the alien agenda, although they may not remember it.
Right, they're used as hosts, I would say, right?
Yeah, a lot of women are used as hosts to grow more hybrids, or just used as breeders in general. And people in general can be used to provide labor for their agenda. And
right. That makes a lot of sense right there. Would you say these... go ahead.
A lot of this is kind of scary stuff. That's why the government's keeping it secret.
Well, and also it rings true insofar as I suspect a lot of this is my lab oriented. In other words, it sounds like a military abduction, maybe a screen memory with an extraterrestrial. What's your take on that?
Well, I think most of the abductions are alien, but some of them may be, from what I've heard reported, some of them may be done by joint project between the aliens and the Black Project community. And there are a few abductions, although they're in the minority, by the Black Project community directly, where they'll re-abduct abductees to try to spy on the aliens and find out what they know about what the aliens are up to.
That's very interesting. And would you say these cases are positive or negative?
Well, it depends how you look at it, I suppose. The aliens seem to be wanting to, attempting to breed a better human race. So if you believe the human race is the end-all, be-all, and God's gift to the universe the way it is, then it's bad. But if you don't believe that, then the aliens may be doing us a favor. By
upgrading humanity, so to speak. Huh?
But it is hard on individual abductees. There's no doubt about that. I tell people there are positive aspects to this, but in general, it's hard on the people that have to undergo it.
Yeah, I understand that. And also it's important to have support groups, which apparently they do have out there close to where you are, correct?
Yeah, we have the Cerro support group in Southern California here, and Barbara Lamb in Claremont has a support group as well. So we're fortunate here in SoCal to have two abduction support groups. Most areas of the country don't have any.
Yeah, exactly.
That's partly because Southern California is a real hot spot for alien abduction. A lot of people don't know that, but that is the case.
That's very interesting. Do you have any ideas insofar as why that is?
Well, Dr. Leir thought that it was because there are so many people in Southern California that are of a creative bent, and that kind of agrees with what I thought about one of the reasons for the abduction program, and that's that the aliens want to incorporate human creativity into their society. They apparently bred out emotion of various types from their people a long time ago to increase their intelligence, and they realize now that that's a mistake, or was a mistake.
That's really interesting. And what are some possible signs of someone containing alien implants?
Well, if you go over the person with a stud finder, a small metal detector that's usually used to detect nails in walls, you can often get signals at typical locations where implants are placed. The only problem with that is that there's a lot of false positives, so you have to confirm any hits you get with the stud finder by X-raying the area to confirm that there's an object present. And you can go over the person with a Gauss meter or milligauss meter, and if the same place that you got to hit with a stud finder has a magnetic field, that's a pretty strong indication of an implant at that location. But you still have to confirm it by X-ray.
Yeah, absolutely. And do all of these implants show up on an X-ray?
No, actually they don't. I mean, the aliens appear to have a mode with at least some of the implants where they're invisible to X-ray. I suspect that the devices do not work in that state, otherwise they'd probably keep it that way all the time, but we've seen them disappear off X-rays or show up on an X-ray one time and not another. So they have some way to change the molecular structure of these things on command such that the X-rays are bounced in a different direction or absorbed or something along those lines. Right,
so they're under intelligent control to some degree.
Yeah, they appear to be. The fact that they're not always transmitting radio waves indicates the strong possibility of that, too. They just give a signal to turn it off.
I find that very interesting. Yeah. Is there anything else besides the radio waves that they're transmitting?
We suspect they're transmitting scalar radio waves in addition to the standard transverse kind. But other than that, we don't know. I mean, they could be transmitting any number of things that we don't have detectors for, like neutrinos or neutrons or any number of things.
Right, but, and it appears to be kind of infinite, huh?
Yeah, we don't have detectors for a lot of these things. Neutrinos would be an ideal way to transmit information if you could do it, and if you had compact detectors for them, because they travel through material objects so well.
Right. Do you see this as the wave of the future, then, insofar as the way we're getting wired up?
Yeah, I do. I actually trust the aliens to do this more than I do my fellow humans. It seems like Einstein was right in saying that giving technology to a government is like giving a psychopath an axe. So they can be counted on apparently to misuse any technology that they're given. So yeah, I think it's the wave of the future. But do I think it's necessarily good? No. I think that technology like this should be used, if it's used at all, by benevolent people, and I don't see the powers that be we have now as being too benevolent.
Yeah, I agree with that. You have to have wisdom with the technology, without a doubt, and hopefully they'll create a balance with that, but you never know. I have seen some negative sides to it, so we'll just have to run the energy for the more positive, huh?
Yeah, and then people seem to forget nowadays, the case of GMO foods is a classic example that just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should, especially at that time in history. Or if you do, maybe you should go a lot more slowly and not just be driven by a profit motive like most companies are today, or most people in general are today. Right.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's kind of like the Frankenstein mode they're in. They just want to keep modifying everything and pushing the envelope. And I understand experimentation, but you have to have some kind of a balance. You do have to draw the line.
Right. I'm not against any kind of experimentation. I mean, I'm a scientist and I'm curious, and I want to try new things.
Right.
But when you're going from the laboratory to the pilot plant scale, or to making a product, you have to be careful at that point that you're not creating something that's got long-term bad effects, and like GMO food. I mean, that's a classic example, because they went really quick on that, and they basically don't know what they're doing, and there are strong indications that GMO foods are very bad for people. They have less nutrients. There's really no evidence that they grow more food than standard seeds, and the experiments on rats indicated that it caused organ failure.
Right. And then I'm wondering how I wonder how the interaction is between genetically modified foods and an implant embedded in someone's body.
That's a very interesting question. There's been no research done on that. Who knows? Maybe the implants would protect you from the influence of bad food. I have reason to believe that the aliens protect their frequent flyer abductees, or what I call Class 2 abductees.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what kind of aliens are we talking about? I think you mentioned the Greys before. Is that pretty much the race we're dealing with? The species?
Yeah, the Greys apparently do most of the implantation and abductions. They've had an abduction program going on since the 1880s or 1890s, according to family histories. And that's probably about when it started. And they do most of the abduction, most of the implantation, and they're actually an alliance of several similar species, and they seem to be doing this to create hybrids of humans and themselves, and also to genetically improve our race to probably keep us from screwing up the planet and make us less violent and primitive savages.
Well, it seems like it's going in the opposite direction right now. The Earth looks like it's at critical mass, and people are acting kind of bizarro, but who knows? It's interesting.
Well,
go ahead.
This is going to be remedied pretty soon, I think. There's going to be some sort of natural or man-made catastrophe, or a combination of both, that's going to kill off a lot of people that are not modified, in my opinion. So? I mean, that's what a lot of people have been led to believe. At any rate, we'll see what happens.
Well, it's interesting. Well, I think we're in store for some big changes without a doubt. There's a lot happening simultaneously, and it's interesting about the checking records from ancestors to see if they had any cases of abductions, and it's really hard to track that, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, there have just been a few instances of it being tracked fairly accurately, but what little data we have indicates that the abduction program was most likely started around the 1880s, 1890s, and that makes sense because that corresponds to the great airship sightings of that period of time.
Mm-hmm. And even
before the airplane was even invented, so it must have been something strange that they were seeing.
And if you look back in biblical times, I mean, they're always painting pictures of UFOs in the background and this and that. So obviously there was some kind of an interaction, right?
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing is nothing new. A lot of people are scared of alien invasion and all that. Well, I think they've been invading for years. I mean, if you have their technology, a covert invasion would be the way to go, not to panic anybody or damage anything. Mm-hmm. And also, this is nothing new. I mean, aliens have been coming to Earth and interbreeding with humanity for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
The Greys, according to Bob Lazar, the Greys told the government they've been coming here for about 10,000 years, so this is nothing new, and there have probably been dozens of other aliens that have visited this planet and interacted with people.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't doubt it at all. And at this point in your research, what would you like to see come to fruition?
Well, I would like to see a major journal publish our findings. We tried to get the Journal of Scientific Exploration to publish the findings on object number 15, and they looked like they were about to do that, and then changed their mind the minute they found out that it was that the object was possibly alien related, which I thought showed intellectual cowardice on their part. We were just going on the merits of the case, saying it was a strange object at first. Then, right before they agreed that they were going to agree to publish the paper, they specifically asked me whether this was alien abduction related, and of course I had to say yes. So they completely changed their tune at that point. And that was a big disappointment to Dr. Leir and to myself after doing a lot of work on this paper, but we're going to try again. So I would like to see that happen. I would like to see these findings published in a major journal. I'd like to see this research in general get a lot more attention, the attention I think it deserves. This is very important to the future of humanity and to our place in the universe. And I would like to see some more thorough analysis going on with the devices. Once they're removed, playing away layers with fast atom bombardment to see the exact layout of the carbon nanotube electronics, and just in general, more thorough microscopic research on the structure of the devices. And I would like to see more research done on the devices before they're removed from the body, the signals and the connections to the nervous system and such.
I agree with that 100%. Well said. And it seems like they have a connection to sound insofar as they interact with sound, would you say?
Well, it could be. Actually, the object number 15 that was removed from a man's toe, Dr. Kuntz thought that it was theoretically possible that it was a microphone to pick up external sound, and I personally think that it might have been a physiological monitoring device as well to measure blood chemistry and such.
That makes sense.
But yeah, according to Dr. Kuntz, you may well be right about them being microphones. And abductee reports also indicate that the brain implants may enable aliens to access the abductee's sensory information. In other words, see what they're seeing and hear what they're hearing in real time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that, just coming from my own benchmark of measure with my experience with technology like that. So, yeah. It's for real, and I do agree. I think that we need to have more research, more extensive research with people who are what I would call not necessarily targeted, but hosts for this technology, and really start measuring and really showing what's going on. But once again, I think you're crossing the line with covert technology, classified data, and do you think that might have something to do with why, insofar as why people are closing the door to publishing certain journals?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, whether these devices are alien or not, I mean, I think they are. But if they're not alien, then they're government. And that's one thing that people often argue, well, how do you know they're not government? Well, I don't know for sure, but the materials do seem to be from off-planet, from the isotopic ratios, and they seem to be beyond our technology. But if they are government, then they're classified, and that's why the journals would be closing the door to this type of research, or that's why it's frowned upon. By the mainstream, or if they're alien, then the same thing applies. It would be considered classified because they want to have the technology for themselves, and just the fact that other people are doing this would also tend to expose what they're doing, so they wouldn't want it talked about for that reason either.
Yeah, it sure sounds like the Black Space Program to me when you talk about off-world technology. Sounds like there's a connection there.
Oh yeah, I'm sure these implants were originally developed for the alien space program. It would be perfect to be able to hear and see what the astronaut is hearing and seeing in real time.
Absolutely.
And to monitor their physiologies by placing a couple of implants in their body.
I agree with that, and I totally
non-invasive.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I think that's really the objective, but it's unfortunate because I think that they're misusing the technology right now with a lot of people that they've been abducting or inducting to the experimentation. So.
Well, it seems like all our government's interested in with sort of technology is mind control. I mean,
right.
I don't understand why people can't do something constructive for a change with this type of technology, or any type of technology for that matter. They want to remove anything that's remotely dangerous from the hands of the general public, but yet the minute the people in power get a hold of something, they want to use it for the worst possible means imaginable. And I agree. It just blows my mind how things can be like this. I mean, I think that something needs to be done. I'm not sure exactly what, but society needs to change in fundamental ways. I mean, there needs to be more transparency in government, at the very least, and some more accountability by our public officials.
I agree. Well, what I see is that they're weaponizing the technology itself. I agree with you. I think it's a fabulous technology. I think it can be used in a positive, but they're using it in a negative. They're weaponizing it, and they're turning people into weapons by, inducting them, abducting them, and then implanting them so that they can control their brainwave activity. I mean, it can be very negative, without a doubt.
Right. Well, I also have reason to believe that these implants can be used by the aliens to implant suggestions in the mind of the abductee that are very difficult to ignore because the abductee thinks it's their idea. And I think the government wants to be able to do that as well. And I think that the positive aspect of this might be that if you put a couple implants in somebody with this technology, you might be able to ward off any disease.
Mm-hmm.
And there are strong indications that diseases can be either induced or controlled electromagnetically by the right scalar wave pattern and frequency.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, frequency for sure. Just look at the Rife medicine and other forms of technology that have been used for,
Yeah, the Russians had a means during the Cold War of inducing cancer in pretty much anybody they wanted by means of microwaves. They did that to several of our ambassadors, from what I understand, in the Soviet embassy in Moscow, or the U.S. embassy in Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure both they and our government have refined these techniques over time. Part of the reason that they banned Rife's research is that he was able to eradicate almost any disease by the right scalar frequencies. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but apparently you can also reverse the process and induce any disease. So it's a potential weapon. And,
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a potential weapon, and they don't want people being too well or cured too easily with a few cents worth of electricity, because that means they can't profit off billion-dollar drugs anymore.
Exactly. That's well said.
The drug industry is very profitable for them, just like the oil industry is very profitable in the energy field.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe frequency heals, and it can destroy just like anything else, without a doubt. And also these dormant viruses that they say are not active. I mean, they can be activated through frequency, without a doubt. So you're dealing with things like that.
Oh, yeah, I have no doubt of that. And there's also slow viruses in the body. When I was in biotech, they talked about those quite a bit, where they operate so slowly that it's difficult to tell that it's a virus operating, but it's a virus nonetheless. A lot of these degenerative diseases are probably caused by those.
Yep, slow bleed. That's really, really interesting. And have you ever felt like you've been shadowed by the government insofar as monitored a little too much for what you know and the way you work?
Oh, yeah. My phones have been bugged for years. I hear clicks and pops and echoes all the time. Sometimes when I'm talking to other people, other big hitters in the UFO field, they even try to interrupt the conversation by turning up the echo so high, usually that you can't hear anymore, or they'll just straight out cut off the conversation. I got cut off with Dr. Leir several times, and he and I both knew what happened. And talking to people that have had extensive alien contact, a lot of times the same thing happens.
Right.
And I'm followed occasionally, and got threatened by NASA once back in 2009, before we did the removal of object number 16. But they haven't made any serious effort to stop me at this point. But I know we're in the midst of another crackdown on this field. I thought they'd gotten over that madness, but apparently not.
So you think they're going to try and crack down on what you guys are doing?
Well, I hope not. I'm pretty sure that Lloyd Pye's death wasn't an accident, though, for example. And they apparently killed Tom Van Flandern, too. I don't know if you remember who he was. He was the former head of the U.S. Naval Observatory, and he made a lot of comments about the artificial structures on Mars, and they didn't like that. He died of a very fast-moving case of colon cancer, which apparently is one of the things they're able to induce.
It's interesting because I've talked to some people who I found to be extremely creative, inventive, genius mind type people. I don't know if you remember Mark Bean, but he was working with Tesla technology and supposedly was healing cancer patients. And after 3 months after I interviewed him, he died. Mysterious to me. But, I won't go into specifics of it. But I found it to be very interesting because it seems to me like these people are being targeted. And you can make things look like accidents, right?
Yeah, nobody questions a death from cancer. Nobody questions a car accident. Nobody questions a plane crash. Nobody questions suicide in general, and those are all methods they've used in the past. And healing cancer is something they definitely don't want. They've tried to stop just about everybody that's had a cheap, workable cancer cure. It's really not a disease that's as hard to beat as the system wants you to believe. I know, for example, in my own just messing around with stuff, I've seen taking large amounts of sodium selenite cure skin cancer on 2 occasions in people I've known. selenium is very effective against cancer. It has a direct toxic action against tumor cells, and it also stimulates the immune system to fight the cancer.
Very interesting. And I also am a firm believer that the body has a real capacity to heal naturally.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you remove the bad conditions that are causing the infection or the cancer or whatever the case might be, then there's a good chance the body's immune system will take over and fight it and fight it off. Cancer also, now that we're on the subject, I think is caused by mycoplasmas or mycoplasma-like organisms rather than by random genetic changes like conventional wisdom teaches. I'm sure all the mutations that they've cataloged in cancer cells, I'm sure that's all correct. But I mean, the question is, what's causing it? There's a lot of evidence actually that mycoplasmas form in response to bad conditions in the body, like excessive acidity, and it's known for sure that some of them can transform human cells into cancer cells.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That probably also neatly explains why mycoplasma outbreaks are a big problem with cultured tumor cells.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And once again, that can be treated, and I'm sure it's curable. Yeah,
some studies have indicated that it's curable with antibiotics, even if the transformation didn't take place that long before, but then it becomes permanent. But the Rife technique with the right frequency of scalar waves can get rid of it, apparently, or just eating a very good diet, getting all the required trace minerals like selenium.
Mm-hmm. Right, and radionics too. I've tried radionics, and I really liked it. And it worked very well.
Is that something like the Rife technique? Or?
It's very similar. Yeah, you're working with frequencies associated with the electromagnetic field and fine-tuning your electromagnetic field to spin out dirty electricity and other things. Yeah, it worked really well. I used that back in the 90s, and it was incredible. Yeah, so it's definitely, there's a parallel there without a doubt. And I think
we should keep using it.
Yeah, well, the technology, it's interesting. It's a long story, but it goes back to someone who built it from Canada who's no longer around. It's a long story. Well, there is a different form of radionics, but yeah, it's very interesting. I'll tell you about that sometime.
Right. We'll have to talk to you about that sometime.
Oh, yeah.
Probably then.
Unfortunately, the program he developed is outdated, and it needs to be updated. But I'll definitely run that by you for sure. But what do you think?
Sounds good.
Yeah, what do you think or why do you think there is such secrecy with alien technology? I mean, do you think it's just about control, manipulation, and money versus anything else?
It's about control, manipulation, money, and these people you're dealing with a bunch of paranoid people, and they're afraid that other people will get the technology and use it against them, so they want to classify it for that reason. And I think that we're getting to the place where only a certain number of technologies are allowed in civilian society. And if you'll notice, we've gone pretty much the so-called modern era is about 50, 60 years old now, and we're still eating pretty much the same foods, driving the same kind of cars, flying the same kind of airplanes were 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, back in the 60s, the rate of change of the technology was fantastic compared to today. And it's easy to conclude, especially given reliable information that other technologies are possible, that somebody doesn't want any more progress, that there's been an intentional arrest of progress in the civilian sector. The only progress being allowed apparently is in the fields of communications and computer technology.
Right, it's all defense satellites. And also it strikes me as we do have a breakaway society, so that the technology is still expanding, however it's not being exposed to the mainstream.
Right, absolutely. I firmly believe that. And actually, Senator Mike Gravel at the Citizens Convention on Disclosure in Washington, D.C. Last year said that we did have a breakaway society and a secret space program utilizing anti-gravity technology.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting that if you go back and look at old aerospace magazines in the 1950s, they were saying that research was being done on so-called anti-gravity or electric propulsion and non-rocket, non-jet propulsion. And it was based on the work of Townsend Brown and others who actually reportedly built flying test craft using those technologies. And then by the 1960s, the government was trying to convince everybody that they were crazy for believing in it. So that tells me that they had some success, and they were extremely anxious to keep it classified.
Exactly. That's really a shame, isn't it? Instead of getting everybody to step up to a higher level of higher consciousness, we're just kind of dumbing everybody down. That's too bad.
Well, they say they're concerned about the so-called energy crisis or pollution and all that, but these anti-gravity systems, even in primitive form, would be much more efficient as prime movers for society than the internal combustion engine or just what we're using now. Like say you used one of these systems to power a ship. I mean, it might use a third or a fourth as much energy as what we're using now. The ratio of energy put in to propulsive force put out with these technologies is far greater than with anything we're using now.
I agree with that too. Yeah, and what are some of the warning signs of a possible abduction for someone who thinks they might have implants?
Some of the warning signs. If your family's ever reported alien contact, waking up with red dots on your skin or triangles, bruising, unexplained bruising, strange dreams of aliens or UFOs, or just traumatic dreams in general. You might not remember exactly what they were, but in women, feeling like you're pregnant and then it's gone, or actually, remembering beings in your room, or that's about it. And then to find much beyond that, you need to consult somebody or get the instruments to do the scanning. Like scanning with ultraviolet light is very effective in detecting recent alien contact, because there are marker dyes left behind by the aliens, and sometimes in the form of writing even, or what looks like writing, and they have a liquid on their skin that fluoresces strongly under ultraviolet light, and you can find alien handprints on people, or just finger marks in general, with them and their bedroom walls a lot of times.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And if people do want an assessment by you, they can just contact you through your website, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be good. And I honestly don't know many people who are qualified to do the kind of work you're doing right now. Anybody else?
Yeah, these things aren't widely known.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely very effective, as I've seen, and people need to get involved in understanding this technology. Even if you don't believe in aliens, I mean, there's something going on with covert technology, and there's definitely implantation and abduction and induction cases that are being, they're happening across the board. So.
Yeah, whether you believe in aliens or not, I can see that there's still maybe some hesitancy to believe in aliens on the part of some people, and whether you believe in aliens or not, there's something going on. The evidence that there are UFOs, unconventional flying objects flying around, is overwhelming, and the evidence is also pretty overwhelming that the government's been experimenting with advanced propulsion technology for years. When I used to work out at Point Mugu Naval Air Station as a summer job, some of the old timers out there, I asked about it. I didn't believe in anti-gravity at the time. I just asked around about it, and several of the old timers out there just told me, "Oh yeah, the government's been experimenting with anti-gravity for years, or fooling around with anti-gravity for years." And
hidden in plain sight.
Dr. Kuntz actually reproduced Townsend Brown's first experiments and proved that charging up a capacitor to a high voltage will produce a thrust, like he said. So that's good enough for me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a firm believer. We've had that for a very long time also. And once again, it's just in the cloaked society.
The Russians actually reproduced John Searle's work as well, where they demonstrated that a device very similar to the one Searle made produced a thrust and seemed to produce a lot more power than was put into it. So that was a very interesting paper as well by Roshan and Godin. If people look that up, Russian duplication of serials research or Roshan and Godin, that should come up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And what is your take on the CERN?
The sun?
The CERN.
It's probably due for some major eruptions pretty soon. The sunspot activity.
Oh, no, I said the CERN, C-E-R-N.
Oh, CERN. Okay, oh, sorry.
That's okay.
In what respect?
Well, insofar as, do you think it's creating any anomalies? Do you think there's anything suspicious about what's going on over there? Or?
Well, I mean, in theory, if you're talking about the black hole controversy, I think in theory they're colliding beams of protons and antiprotons could produce a black hole, but in theory it should evaporate very quickly when it's that small. It would be a black hole the mass of a couple of protons would be far, far smaller than an atom and probably too small to suck up any matter. Mm-hmm. And it would also evaporate very quickly. Stephen Hawking, in some of his best work, gave some pretty good arguments that black holes shouldn't be black, especially if they're small. They should evaporate, and the smaller they are, the faster they evaporate because of the presence of the zero-point energy. Mm-hmm. If a black hole sucks in a pair of a particle-antiparticle pair that's in the zero-point energy, then the energy to create that second particle that would have annihilated with its partner, if the black hole hadn't sucked up the first one, that energy has to come out of the black hole. So that leads to the black hole actually emitting matter at a very low rate, and the greater the curvature of the event horizon, the faster that process would be. So the smaller they get, the faster they evaporate until they finally explode. And we've actually seen that process a few times through telescopes. Mm-hmm. So if you, at least by that logic, if you created a very small black hole, it would just evaporate very quickly. So I don't think there's any danger there, but who knows? We don't know everything about them.
Yeah, I was curious insofar as if it was creating any anomalies across the globe, but yeah, it makes sense what you're talking about. So
it could be creating other anomalies we don't even know about. But,
yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Yep, it's one big universe.
It's just hard to say. It could be creating a very strong scalar signal, for example, that would have all kinds of unforeseen effects. But
right.
I haven't heard of any offhand of you.
No, but I keep track. I just kind of monitor activity, and I look at anomalies across the board and see, anything that looks kind of like it's not supposed to be there, I take a look at. And sometimes we were talking about a friend of mine was talking about these, the sounds across the board, and insofar as all these sounds that sound like trumpets, earth, whatever you want to call it, earth sounds.
Oh, yeah, that was neat.
Yeah, so, I mean, you can come up with different answers to the equation, but I always find it very fascinating, nonetheless, to look in different avenues for that.
Yeah, it almost seemed like the crust was stress in the crust was responsible for some of those. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing that's not widely known too is that the entire crust of the Earth is apparently under compressive stress. If you do any kind of major blasting, especially underground nuclear testing, you always get out more energy than you put in. Mm-hmm. There can be small earthquakes for days after setting off a nuclear blast, even if there's no fault line nearby. So that indicates to me that the crust is under compressive stress. Mm-hmm. And so somehow that might have been responsible for some of these sounds, but why they're happening all at once is a bit of a mystery.
Yeah, I agree. Well, just take notes and kind of keep a little notebook of what's happening, right?
Right, and the sunspots, in theory, could create some gravitational disturbances, so perhaps that's what triggered some of these noises. We had a lot of sunspot activity the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And Steve, we're going to head for a break real quick. We'll be right back, everybody. Stay tuned to Hyperspace with Steve Colbern. Welcome back, everybody, to Hyperspace. I'm Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my special guest, Steve Colbern. And Steve, are you with me?
Hi, how are you?
All right.
I'm here.
You are. And how many cases do you think that you've investigated are actually valid insofar as the implant analysis goes?
Valid in what way?
Valid insofar as, legitimate.
Well, of the people that have come to me claiming that they've had implants, I would say that most of them either have implants for sure or have indications of implants. There are a few, perhaps 25% that are just kind of crazy and wannabes or people that have talked themselves into thinking that they're abductees. But there's no shortage of people with implants out there. I mean, most people that are abducted have one or more implants. It appears.
It sounds like it also. And what would you say the percentage is insofar as how many per year? How many abduction cases per year as an estimate?
You mean worldwide?
Well, insofar as, let's start with America.
Well, the Roper poll indicated that about 3% of the population may be abductees and that they've been taken once or twice. I've had some alien contact. I suspect that frequent flyer abductees, Class 2 abductees as I call them, are about 100 times less, 100 to 1,000 times less common than that, but that would still leave between 10,000 or 100,000 and a million frequent flyers. So that's still a lot of people. Oh,
it is. And it makes me wonder if they're not trying to remotely control society to some extent. I mean, we did talk about the implants and the intent behind the implants. Now, it could be used as a positive, but once again, it can also be used to mind control and subliminally program a subject.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest fears the government has of this is that they think that the aliens might be able to push a button someplace and turn all the abductees, or at least all the frequent flyers, into soldiers for them. I don't know if they can do that or not, but just that possibility is enough to keep people in the Black Project community up at night, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, in theory, I would say that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility too. I know from my own from the research I've done that it's almost for sure that they can implant strong suggestions in people, and it's just one step away from that to direct control.
Right, and also, how many of these targets, well, not targets, but abductees, are actually experiencing a form of telepathic communication?
I'd say most of them are. That's how most aliens communicate, especially the Greys. They're true telepaths. They can implant suggestions. They can put images in people's minds. They can do direct control without any technology if the person's if they're trying to control is close enough to them. It seems to have a range of between 100 and 200 feet based on abductee reports. And they have a pretty potent telepathic ability.
And that's interesting because it kind of dovetails into psychotronic technology.
Yeah, all the great technology is based on amplifying natural abilities like telepathy using mechanical devices. Right,
exactly, which once again, it can be weaponized without a doubt. So we're dealing with something that could be a real threat to our civilization on some level.
Yeah, I guess from the standpoint of a person that's sworn to defend the country, I suppose that would be a major threat or a potential threat. I don't think they're an actual threat, but they are a potential threat.
Well, anytime you're working with technology like that, and I also think that the NSA, quote unquote, no such agency, but literally, I mean, you're dealing with people who monitor off-world technology to some extent, and also people who have been abducted or inducted into covert programs so that they can assess them and monitor what's happening. So there you go. With a lot of different technology.
Yeah, I think that these people are far too powerful to fight. I used to think that the aliens were only a few hundred years ahead of us. I think that now that they're probably as much as a million years ahead of us. Dr. Humans thought so too.
Yeah.
And they're far too powerful to fight. And I think that's why the governments reported they made treaties with them. What choice did they have?
Well, there's a big, universe out there, and it's a multiverse. And there's all different species and things that are there, and how many of those beings have we really established communication with is the question, right? Yeah,
very few in the scheme of things, but as far as an absolute number down here, it might be quite a few. There were some reports a while back supposedly from government sources that 18 different species were having regular contact with people on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And how many do you think are hybrids on this planet?
How many in an absolute number? Or?
Well, what would be your estimate insofar as the people on this planet being hybrids?
Well, I think that a lot of people have been genetically modified by the aliens, millions at least, and they've reportedly put hybrids down here to live at this point. I'm not sure how many there are. Probably tens of thousands would be my guess.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering how much the implant alters the DNA to create.
That's interesting. Dr. Leir thought that they could alter the DNA, and there are some laboratory experimental findings that indicate that that might be a possibility. Apparently, DNA has been influenced by exposing bacteria to radio frequencies, so it's quite possible that the implants affect DNA.
Right.
Alter the genome remotely.
I agree with that. Also, frequency alters the DNA. Frequency alters your vibrational signature and your DNA template to some extent. I mean, we all know that. Consciousness plays a big part, so it's all part of that big equation.
Well, that might be part of the purpose of DNA in the body is to act as an antenna to connect the living cell to the quantum vacuum, the 0-point energy.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense.
It's a spiral antenna. Theoretically, that would pick up scalar waves very well.
Mm-hmm. And generate them, I would say, right?
Yeah, and generate them as well, certainly.
Yeah, through intent alone. And a lot of people who do meditation, and I'm being one of them, I mean, I understand the Merkaba signal and how you generate to higher levels of consciousness, and you start actually creating a 0-point transmission in a scalar wave. So,
yeah, apparently, based on John Hutchison's experiments, apparently all it takes is a small signal of the right frequency to get a very large response from the 0-point energy as well. So some of these reports of strange, powerful abilities may well be true.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I think it enhances the natural design.
0-point energy.
What's that?
If so, they're powered by the 0-point energy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And also, if you want to get into the soul and the essence of the soul, whatever you want to call it, your spiritual design, your chi, universal life force energy, that's all based on 0.2. So there you go. Yeah. It's all connected, interconnected into the universe and the great central.
Everything is connected to everything else in the universe through the 0-point energy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's where the ultramodern physics that's just coming online now and mysticism come into contact. The all-pervading ether, the 18th century physics used to call it, and they threw the baby out with the bathwater a little too soon when relativity said that the CPE did not exist.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Field theory requires it. So.
Mm-hmm. And does blood or frequency have any connection at all to the implants? The frequency of blood. Does the blood itself of a subject or the vibration associated with the blood have anything to do with implants?
I'm not sure how to answer that. Blood type is supposed to be a minor factor, according to some people, in determining whether whether the aliens are going to be interested in somebody. There's a slight correlation, or appears to be a slight correlation between having type A or O blood or Rh negative blood and being an abductee.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. I've heard that before, and also I've heard, and this is something new, but they were talking about holographic blood, and I think I mentioned that to you before, so I was a little bit interested in so far as if you heard anything about that. I'm going to have to do a lot more research about it, but supposedly holographic blood. Pardon me?
I've heard of artificial blood based on fluorocarbons. I've never heard of holographic blood.
Right. Well, I guess they're implying that the blood itself is holographic in design, which would make sense because we are multidimensional beings. So I can imagine that perhaps the blood is holographic to some degree. But that's another story altogether. But yeah,
I'll have to research that.
Yeah, me too. I'm doing more extensive research on it. I'll let you know what I come up with. But it's fascinating and something to spin your wheels about. And that goes for anybody else who's listening. It's to me that just hits some some truth. So, but insofar as these implants go, now we know that you can remove them through surgery. But what else can people do to perhaps they don't want their implants and they want to disable them? Is there anything at all people can do to switch them off?
I'm sure there is a way to switch them off, but you'd have to know what the alien command structure was to do it.
Right. Okay.
It seems unlikely you could disable them without physically disable them without harming the host, but I'm sure there definitely is a way to turn them off. We just don't know how to do it. But perhaps when we get more information on what signals they're giving off, we might be able to decipher that.
Yeah, it's my take that I think the brainwave activity has a lot to do with keeping these implants functioning.
Well, that makes perfect sense. It seems like being connected to the nervous system provides some sort of signal that keeps them functioning, and there's got to be some specific pulse or combination of signals that cause it to start transmitting.
Exactly.
So you should be able to turn it off.
Well, yeah. I mean, they do run. There's no doubt about that. I've had mine for 10 years now, so, for what it's worth. But do you feel there, I think that these implants are there for a reason, obviously. And looking into the transhumanism agenda, I find that there seems to be some correlation between the two. What is your impression of that?
Well, I think that the aliens want to produce a more reasonable and more intelligent race of humans, and the implants are there to facilitate that and to monitor the people that they're changing. Well,
that would make sense too. But then you have to ask, why won't they just clone?
They will. I mean, they're into cloning reportedly, but in fact, that's how most greys reproduce. That's why they don't have any external genitalia. But they need to have a being that they want in order to clone it. I mean, just like you have to have something written down on paper looking exactly the way you want before you make copies of it.
Yeah, that 3D printer comes to mind.
Yeah, in the hybrid program, reportedly now they're right to the stage where they've got pretty much what they want, being that looks human but still has some of the gray abilities and can pass for human. And they're not doing a lot of cloning at this point. They're actually mating hybrids with fifth or sixth generation hybrids with class 2 abductees to try to fine tune the beings that they're getting. I guess once they get some perfect individual, I guess they might clone a few of them.
That's really interesting.
I'm sure they'll get several strains or whatever you want to call it that are very close to what they're looking for and clone them.
Yeah, whatever happened to just having a normal life, huh?
Well, we're talking about space aliens.
I know, but it's so interesting when you think about everything. Isn't life good enough? I mean, that's really my question. Isn't life good enough? To these.
Well, in a lot of ways, it is. I mean, these grays, Dr. Leir thought were the end point of a long series of changes and evolution, and once a species gets technology, and I agree with that. That's why they all tend to look similar. There are races that have had technology a long time, and a lot of them have screwed themselves up. I think that they've been exposed to a lot of radiation from nuclear wars. And they've genetically engineered themselves a lot of times to the point where they can barely reproduce or can't reproduce naturally. And they've just in general abused technology. A lot of abductee reports indicate they've abused transporters, had genetic damage from transporter type technology, that sort of thing, and intentionally bred themselves to be highly intelligent without regard to what else they were giving up, and now they realize that a lot of that was a mistake.
Right. Well, it is a spacesuit we exist in, so I guess it can be modified and changed, but still, it's quite the experiment.
Yeah, the lives of every abductee is an experiment.
Exactly. And I think
they're all individual experiments of nature and nurture, so to speak, the genetic combination, environment.
Yeah. Well, I think coping with that type of modification is difficult for some people, and I don't know what your take is on that. I mean, how have these abductees been acting around your assessment?
Well, it's hard for a lot of people. There's three classes of abductees that I've seen. There's wannabes that really aren't abductees, that they're either just crazy or they're attention hounds, something like that. Then there's another type that they're crazy as well, but they've been driven crazy by their experiences and really are having alien contact. And then there are people that are coping with it fairly well. And they're unfortunately in the minority. I think probably only about less than half anyway, maybe a quarter in my estimation, of people that have a lot of alien contact adapt well to it. It causes a lot of stress, it causes PTSD, it causes people to feel like they can't fit in down here. So it is definitely hard on these individuals that they're having a lot of contact. It's hard on a lot of people that have had just limited contact, for that matter. It can be. It depends on the person's mindset. People that have a real rigid worldview, that need to have things a certain way, need to think that they know everything, are the ones that crack up most easily when exposed to this phenomenon.
Yeah, it's a life-changing event.
Yeah, contact with any alien being is a life-changing event, definitely. I mean, we're taught that this is all impossible and that we're the only ones in the universe, so it's naturally going to be a shock to anybody that finds out firsthand otherwise.
Right, and that's the unfortunate side of it. You think that by now they would just go ahead and open up the door for communication and just say, yes, this is what's going on, instead of hiding and deceiving. And I do think that at some point in the continuum, they will come forward and everything will be open.
I think they'll have to eventually. They're just going to hold out as long as possible, and I think the aliens might be the ones to have to disclose. I'm not sure the U.S. government's ever going to disclose voluntarily, at least not everything. And there already has been some disclosure. I mean, the information's out there to anybody that wants to research it. But as far as the mainstream media talking about it, it's going to be a while. And I think they messed up back in 1947 by just not admitting to it right away after the Roswell crash. And that kind of puts the lie in my mind to them thinking that the aliens are that much of a threat, because you can't fight what you don't believe in. If they really thought they were a threat, they should have announced it right away, I would think.
I would think so.
Been the wise thing to do.
Yeah, they're definitely threatened by an off-world intelligence, without a doubt. And I do believe we are descendants of that species. I mean, I believe we're star beings. I've said that before, and we have a connection, and we're merged with that universal consciousness.
Yeah, like I say, I think aliens have been coming to Earth for thousands of years and interbreeding with people, and there have been star beings, hybrids, on Earth for at least that long, maybe longer. Maybe they've been coming here throughout Earth's history, for all we know.
Exactly. And you are also a chemist, so how do you balance those two worlds with your implant analysis and your regular, I don't want to say linear job, but how do you balance the two?
Well, I try to combine the two, and actually I've done some of the research with instruments at work. I've stopped doing that because they found out about it and weren't too pleased, but I don't really talk about it that much at work. I have mentioned that it's my hobby and that I go to UFO conventions, but not much else. I don't think that the corporate world and this sort of thing are compatible. I mean, the corporate world has too much money to lose to violate the taboos of society, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a lot of programming and mental conditioning when you think about it. And it's really sad.
Even if a lot of people in the corporate world believe in this stuff, they're not gonna. They're just not going to go there. They've just got too much to lose, or perceive it as such.
Yeah. Well.
And I really despise the corporate mentality worldwide. But in fact, I think they're a lot worse than the government in a lot of ways. They'd commit mass murder if they thought it was profitable and there were no law against it.
Yeah, they're an old dinosaur. I see them fading out. But you're right. I mean, that's the mainstream norm. And if you go outside their little box, they're not comfortable.
No, not at all. I mean, they're even uncomfortable with stuff that does not violate any taboos that would produce breakthroughs. It's almost like they're all in cahoots and they don't want to outdo each other too bad.
Yeah, I see that too. It's very difficult. Yeah, it's actually very dysfunctional when you think about it. And once again, it does a disservice on a bigger scale.
Well, yeah, it was a lot better back in the day when they did just worry about the money and that was it. Now it's like they worry about both the money and their corporate agenda, whatever that might be. And sometimes they actually worry about office politics more than they worry about the bottom line of making a profit, which makes them a lot more unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
But I'll tell you one thing: they'll never completely give up profit just to do good works or whatever. That's what they want people to believe a lot of times.
Right. It's all about money, and until we do away with that illusion, which is an illusion to some extent, then we're never going to shift it. We're going to have to shift it on a different level, without a doubt. But there is a collision happening. I mean, I see worlds in collision all the time here on this planet with different levels of consciousness and technology. And, we've got the covert departments, we've got black budget programs, we've got, mainstream, and then we have the alternative media and scientists like yourself who are there on the front lines with this technology.
Yeah, there's some people like me out there that are just getting fed up with this kind of control and just going like, why can't we break through the next level? And I think that sort of pressure on the existing system will increase. I just hope it increases enough to see disclosure and free research and more progress in my lifetime.
Right. Well, if you look at the UFO disclosure that recently happened, I mean, I don't see much coming from that. Quite honestly, what's your impression?
Which disclosure?
Well, the UFO disclosure, the one in D.C. I mean,
Oh, you mean the citizens' hearing?
Yeah.
I think that people were a bit overly optimistic that would lead to disclosure directly. I think I think it does a service. I think it does highlight the problem to the general public, and I think that they will eventually get disclosure by keeping up the pressure over a long period of time. But it's going to take more than one or two events to have that effect. They're going to have to put pressure on the United Nations and individual powerful governments over time, and they're going to have to get a lot of people with power and influence on the bandwagon for there to be any hope of major disclosure because of public pressure.
Yeah, I agree with that too. It just seems like it's almost falling on deaf ears. I hate to say it, but it seems like they're talking to the wrong people when it comes down to it, that we need to be addressing it on a global level. But also, when you look at it, there's all these departments who would love to have access to all of this technology, which I'm sure they do. And of course, they don't want to go mainstream with it and disclose it to everyone because they're using it for their own agenda.
Yeah, and they have too much. The Black Project people have too much to lose by disclosing. They've told all these lies. They've killed people over keeping this secret. They've violated about every law imaginable, and they'd be the last people to want to disclose just because some people are protesting or asking them to.
Right, exactly. Look how many patents have been stolen by incredible inventors.
Oh, yeah, that's an unknown national scandal. I mean, I had one of my patents held up for almost 5 years, a patent to put almost any desired metal inside carbon nanotubes to alter their properties. What happens is that anytime somebody tries to patent anything in this country, it goes before a patent review board at the patent office, and like 5 or 6 different agencies, including the NSA, have a chance then to hold that patent up and take possession of it if they want to. So they can tell you that your patent has national security implications and that you can't talk about it or do any research on it or make any money off it for 5 years or more.
Oh, wow.
And after the first 5 years, if they still think it's important, they can put another 5-year hold on it if they want. So
that's incredible.
So my advice to budding inventors would be to publish something, or patent rather, something outside the country first. If they think it's anything sensitive. That's
a good idea. Yep, I would do that also. Unless it's like that elsewhere.
And once it's in the public domain, then they can't do that.
Well, everything these days is going to be classified or, a national security threat, That's that's like a generic term these days for everything.
Yeah, the number of patents held up. I read an article on this recently. The number of patents held up is increasing exponentially. I mean, it was only a few back in the 80s and 90s. Now it's up to something like 400 a year. I mean, it's ridiculous. Basically, anything more interesting than the next generation of herbal hair gel has a pretty good chance of being held up by one of these agencies.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it's a real shame. It slows progress down immensely.
Yeah, it's deliberate sabotage.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's not enough that they siphon off the best scientists. That they have to sabotage civilian research as well, which is basically what they're doing. On a lot of these patents, they probably have the technology already. They just don't want civilian science to have it.
Right. Just like what they did with the Tesla information and technology as well. And of course, they've been using that in the underground for a long time, and actually everywhere. I mean, his technology is everywhere.
Oh yeah, they've been using Tesla technology at least since the 60s, for example, to communicate with submerged submarines.
Right.
The version of his Wardenclyffe Tower that could transmit electricity or signals anywhere in the world through the Earth. It's ELF based.
Free energy.
Yeah, at a frequency of, I think it's 8.3 hertz, the Earth acts as a conductive metal ball to high voltage, low amperage signals.
Which leads me to believe, what's interesting, it leads me to believe there's a frequency fence so that they don't want that free energy deployed. So, what better way than to have a frequency fence, right?
Right, and with these type of devices, you often get out more energy than you put in. That's why Tesla called the Wardenclyffe Tower his magnifying transmitter, because it magnified the energy being put in. Yeah,
that's fascinating. Wow, if he was around today, I think he'd be rolling around thinking, "What the heck happened?" Huh?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that Tesla might have been one of the prototype hybrids. He was born about the right time, and he certainly looked the part.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that one.
He was 200 years ahead of his time.
At least, without a doubt.
He reportedly had things that we don't even have today, like a camera that where you could get images of something a few miles away, where there was no camera necessary at the viewing site.
What does that tell you? Well, we're far, far beyond a lot of things that people don't normally see from day to day, without a doubt. Yeah. And can you explain your work? I know with Dr. Roger Leir, what type of lab environment did you use for your testing? And I know you can't really elaborate a whole lot, but where do you send your findings?
Well, the protocol goes that we take the object out of the body and put it in blood plasma from the patient, and on one removal, we actually put it under a microscope immediately, a dissecting scope immediately, and got some interesting shots of the nerve cells going into the device. Unfortunately, the person that supplied the microscope did not give us copies of those pictures, but I'm going to incorporate that in future surgeries, that step. And after that, we take pictures of it in situ and take pictures under a dissecting scope at magnifications up to about 50 times, then dissect the device out of whatever tissue capsule it's in, take more pictures under light microscopy at magnifications up to 1,000 times. Then we do scanning electron microscopy at whatever magnification we can get up to. These devices, interestingly enough, are difficult to focus on under SEM. It's almost like they're still operating at some low level, and there's perhaps a magnetic field that prevents focusing at much above 10,000 times magnification. But we go as high as we can at any rate, consistent with getting a good picture. And we do EDX, bulk elemental analysis at the same time, and we usually cut the metallic portion of the object in half before doing SEM, so we can get a view of the interior of the object as well. And after that's done, we then send it out for ICP-MS, trace element analysis, and isotopic analysis at the same time to determine whether what the trace elements are and whether the material's from off planet. And I take half the device and do Raman spectroscopy on it, and try to determine whether there's carbon nanotubes either on the exterior or the interior.
Mm-hmm.
That's a technique that's often used it's a laser technique that's often used to find carbon nanotubes, because carbon nanotubes resonate strongly with many laser wavelengths.
Yeah, and where do you store these implants?
I don't know if I should say, but
that's okay.
They're in a refrigerator.
Okay, so they're in a secure location?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
Okay. And you guys have control over that, not someone else?
Yeah, we would never give control to somebody else.
Okay, no government agency, anything like that?
No, nothing like that.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, so you have a little bit of, clout, shall we say?
Yeah, physically holding on to the object is very important.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it's evidence right there.
Yeah.
Well, for sure. Are you planning on doing another documentary or anything like that with these implants?
Yeah, sure, if somebody approaches me on it.
Okay.
In fact, we're going to be doing a couple more Watchers DVDs, if nothing else. Rick Shaw is still very interested in funding the research and perhaps doing a couple more removals.
Oh, that's excellent. I bet you have a lineup of people wanting to have implants removed, yes?
Yeah, Roger had 5 people lined up, and I've got more people than I could possibly do that probably have implants that have the preliminary indications of implants. Mm-hmm. And there's no shortage of either people with implants or volunteers for the procedure.
Right. Yeah, well, I think a lot of people would like these things removed if they're not doing something positive for them. And who knows how they really got there. I mean, why are they there really is the question. And what is the purpose and intent behind it? Now, we could look at it as a positive, but at the same time, coming from my background, I look at things as weaponized. So that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, well, the Greys are military enough where they remind me of a high-tech foreign military. They at least got the capability of using the devices as weapons, I'm sure, but they don't generally use them as such.
Mm-hmm. Right. But I think we would. And it's interesting. How long do you think these implants last? Do you think that they can last a long time?
Oh yeah, I'm sure they would last hundreds of years. They'll, in my opinion, last longer than the body of the host.
That's very interesting.
Most alien equipment is built to last.
Right.
And it often continues operating even when it's partially destroyed.
That's really amazing. This whole avenue is I find very fascinating in general. And do you think high-profile personalities have implants, like presidents and?
Yeah, I've speculated on that for a while. That if I had their technology and wanted to keep an eye on the society, that's what I would do. Mm-hmm. Just implant people with access to sensitive knowledge and the inner workings of politics.
Mm-hmm. So who controls the Greys?
I don't know if anybody controls them. They're reportedly an alliance of similar species that have some sort of council that they can decide what to do at. But I don't know. That's just sheer speculation at this point, based on FOT reports. But there have been some reports that they work together. They sometimes work together with reptilians. Whether the reptilians control them or not, I don't know.
Well, at least you have hard evidence, and I think that's the most important thing right now.
Yeah, we have hard evidence that something most likely alien is going on. Absolutely. I mean, these devices have very odd isotopic ratios and have either come from outer space, probably not even from the solar system, or they've been exposed to extremely high fluxes of nuclear radiation. Either way, the materials are unusual. And they're meteoric iron, or there's meteoric iron in most of the devices anyway. So that right there indicates the materials came from space.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all very fascinating. And what's the most significant experience you had with Dr. Leir? that you can recall?
Well, we had a significant experience just not too long ago where we went down to SEAL Labs to both do some scenes for Watcher 7. If anybody hasn't watched Watcher 7, by the way, it's an excellent UFO documentary. I'd recommend it highly. And we were doing a scene for Watcher 7, and also we were analyzing the object with SEM and EDX, and we had a great time doing that. And he scared me really bad driving down there. we were going to be late to the appointment, and he was going like 80 miles an hour down Cannon Road, around curves and everything. And so he was a really fast, agile driver up to the end.
Mm-hmm.
He had a radar detector in his car and would always drive our place real fast, and he was quite a character.
How funny, yeah. He's missed without a doubt. Yeah, I'm glad you're around. It's sad. It really is. I don't know what else to say about it, but it's quite the loss. Yeah,
and I just had a great time with him. We'd going to conventions together and lectures, and I remember going with him to see Dr. David Jacobs speak at BFON LA, and that was a lot of fun. And seeing Roger and him argue about the aliens. Roger was more positive about the aliens than, or the aliens' intentions than Dr. Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs wrote a book called The Threat, where he espoused the theory that the aliens are planning on taking over and replacing humans with hybrids. And Dr. Leir disagreed with that, and it was fun to watch their argument on that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, just about every contact I had with him was significant. He gave me a lot of samples to analyze, samples from crop circles, and we had a lot of discussions about what was forming the crop circles, and a lot of discussions about the grays and their craft and what powers them, and physics. And he was a great friend and a really interesting person to talk to.
Yeah, and what a benefit to everybody who's been implanted with those devices as well. It's nice to have a support system.
Yeah, and he did a great service in talking to people that had implants or been abducted, as providing somebody to talk to that didn't think they were crazy.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And also, the fact that he saw it as a positive is very intriguing to me. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Say again?
The fact that he saw these implants as a positive, I mean, could you elaborate a little bit on that insofar as why he thought that?
Well, he didn't necessarily see the implants themselves as a positive, but he just thought that the aliens' intention was basically good in coming here and doing the things that they do, rather than something negative, or to replace people with hybrids, or invade or destroy us all, or something like that, like a lot of the more alarmist people in the field think.
A little less fear, right?
Yeah, he wasn't fear-based. That's a good way of putting it.
Oh, that's good. Well, I see the off-world species as more positive also. I do see a more devious side to our covert operations department. That's...
Oh, yeah. I think human beings are a lot more devious than the Greys.
Oh, yeah. There's always an agenda, you know?
Yeah, they always got an angle of some kind.
Yeah, exactly. And once again, weaponization comes to mind when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, increasing their power and control. Apparently, our government in general wants nothing less than absolute control of everybody on Earth, and why they want that, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that civilization would completely stagnate if they were completely controlled, but that apparently is what they want.
Yeah, it's almost like a sick mind game. It's like they're bored and don't have anything better to do.
Yeah, that's part of it.
It's like, what's the point? I don't get it either.
Paranoia taken to the nth degree, and they don't really stop to analyze the consequences of their actions, apparently.
I agree. Well, you know what's interesting is when you develop a monster, and say some of these departments are developing a monster with many tentacles, eventually that monster turns on you. And that's what I see. I see the misuse of technology in a lot of these departments that will eventually consume them if they don't watch out. That's their own self-destruct.
Right. And there could be technologies coming out of these black project programs that would be more dangerous than the atomic bomb. I mean, like nanobots, for example. I'm sure they're working on that. Little robots that go in and modify cells. I mean, that could kill us all without us even realizing what's going on until it's too late.
Yeah, and also what they're doing with animals, too, even animal modification and insect modification with nanotechnology.
Yeah.
That, too.
They've even got little tiny. They're even working on little tiny insect-like robots that fly in your window and bug all your conversations and stuff. I just don't see anything positive about something like that.
No.
I mean, I'm sure they're spending billions on this kind of research, and it's like, get a life. I mean, do something constructive for a change. I don't get that kind of.
It's so funny.
And strange reasoning at all.
Well, you know what it is, Steve? Is anybody's life that interesting, really? I mean, I really don't think so. I really don't. Yeah. I think they must be very bored. That's what my take is, anyway.
Yeah, they're very, very bored and very paranoid, I guess. I just cannot relate to that sort of a mindset. But you have to be born as a jarhead robot to understand it, I suppose.
Right, and I think it even does a disservice to the robots. I don't even know if they would pull that card on humanity. No,
it's really kind of straight out evil to be like that. I'm not sure if you could do some of the things that they've been doing without a lot of really malicious intent.
I agree. I love life too much to want to play God with it and destroy it to that extent. This doesn't mesh with me.
Well, we had a system that worked and everything was in balance, and now it's all out of balance, and we're in the middle of the biggest mass extinction since the Cretaceous period because of all the crap we've been doing over the past 100 years or so, and it's really sad and disgusting.
You think the Earth will survive, but the people probably won't. Is that your take, or no?
Yeah, I think eventually that the so-called normals will destroy themselves, or there'll be a mass reset, shall we say, of the population. I think it's going to go down to a few 100 million at some point before it gets larger again. And I think the Earth's going to be repopulated with more advanced individuals.
That's really interesting. And then you wonder if the majority will just break away and go to another planet, altogether.
Well, I think that's what the aliens want too. They want to take some individuals to other planets to repopulate them as well. But I don't think the aliens are going to have to lift a finger to wipe out some of these normals. I think they're going to do it to themselves somehow.
Yeah, I see that too. It's that self-destruct I was talking about. It's the misuse of technology to such an extent. I mean, there's an internal madness that's driving these people to do what they're doing. It's not normal. It's not.
No, people are way too fear-based. I mean, that's got to have some cosmic effect on things when this many people are that fear-based. They think some badass terrorist is going to kill them, or they're lurking behind every bush, and that sort of paranoia just isn't good on many levels, and that's what our society is based on nowadays. It just runs on fear and paranoia and money and power for its own sake, and there needs to be some more concern for the common good and for the environment. And I'm not talking about radical environmentalism, but just concern for your surroundings in addition to just yourself. There's too much me generation, narcissistic thought out there.
I think so too. I think there's an array of just, like you were saying, fear is definitely a block. It's a block energetically here in the United States. And of course, I'm sure in other countries they're dealing with similar situations where it's just no good. It's not running the energy accordingly across the globe. I'd like to see that move also, and hopefully it will. But they have to overcome a lot of things, and a lot of that has to do with programming and propaganda.
Yeah, well, our government's has a bunch of experts at propaganda. Apparently, I mean their propaganda is it goes down a lot easier than like Nazi or communist propaganda, but it's just as insidious and just as mind bending. Some of the sitcoms on TV, in my opinion, for example, are propaganda.
Oh yeah, I don't watch television, but I can understand. That's why I don't watch television.
Yeah,
it's too toxic. It's just I have better things to do.
you can put all kinds of subliminal messages in TV too. They banned that for a while, but then it's not against the law anymore, and probably just so they could do it.
Oh yeah, I'm a firm believer. Yeah, that there's definitely a subliminal form of mind control or mind influence in some form or another across the board. I'm sure, without a doubt, people are being influenced. Yeah.
I think HARP can be used as a method of mind control too, worldwide. I think they're doing that, and that uses ELF frequencies, by the way.
Right, ultra low frequency, right or no?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Ultra low frequency and extremely low frequency, and
yep. And I'm sure it can affect implants, right? Right, Steve?
I would think so. Yeah. I suspect that some of the signals to turn the implants on and off and do different things are probably ELF or ULF.
Right. And once again, that comes to mind insofar as a switch goes, switching on and off.
Yeah, I mean, what we need to do is just expose these implants to a lot of different types of signals, different frequencies and waveforms while they're still in the body, and see what happens.
Well, you know what? I'm here for you if you ever want to do some more experimentation. So I'll throw that at you.
I'm sure I'll take you up on that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Just don't let me just vanish, you know. I kid.
Don't let you vanish?
Yeah, I'll just disintegrate before your eyes, you know.
Well, I wouldn't want to do that.
Oh, no. It's so funny. We're getting ready to wrap this up pretty soon, but we still have some time here. And once again, I want you to go ahead and let everybody know how to get a hold of you if they'd like to get an analysis.
Sure. I have two email addresses. One's S_Colbern, COLBERN at yahoo.com, and the other one is Dr. Otto Octavius 9 at gmail.com. And you can email me at either one of those addresses and just ask for a scan. And I'd be more than happy to accommodate you.
Excellent.
And my website address is www.alienevidenceinc.webs.com.
Excellent. Octavius, I love that one.
Yeah.
That's a new one, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's just kind of a interesting thing. I like Doc Ock out of Marvel Comics, so I thought I'd just
cool.
Get a good password based on that.
Oh, I love it.
It's nice and long.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, do you ever think that the masses will experience a full-blown physical contact with off-world races? Do you think that's going to happen in our lifetime?
As far as them like landing on the White House lawn? Or
actually just landing. Why does it have to be the White House? Why don't they just land anywhere? I mean, across the globe. Why does it have to be over there?
Well, they have. The question is, the answer to that is they have. I mean, the Phoenix Lights incident was something like that.
Right.
That incident actually removed all doubt from my mind that this stuff is alien, because why would the government fly top secret technology over a major city?
Mm-hmm.
And also a lot of those craft that flew over were far too large, in my opinion, to be made by us.
Right. Yeah, and they're always flying around, though. They're not landing.
Yeah. Well, no, they land once in a while, but for everyone that people see landed, I mean, they see probably 100 flying around. But I think that the aliens want people that are ready to hear the message to hear it and to know that they're here, but they don't want to panic the masses. There are, and the government does have a point. There are a lot of people out there that are really not ready for this. I mean, I've had several instances where I've told people what I know about UFOs, and I can tell they believe me. Some people won't believe you, but other people will believe you and get more and more scared with every word. I had an experience like that when my ex-wife and I were buying our condo. We were sitting around signing all these, this volumes of papers, and had nothing better to do, so I started talking about UFOs, and this lady's eyes got as big around as saucers, and she started getting really fearful, and I think there's a lot of people around like that, maybe as much as a third of the population.
Right.
That's what the government's worried about.
Yeah, well, I think that's because of the conditioning via government and other organizations that have been brainwashing people.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I think they should have announced this a long time ago. Even if there were a panic, I mean, people can only panic for so long, and they have to accept it.
You can't coddle people. They have to grow up at some point in the continuum, That's my take on it anyway.
Yeah, and I just don't think they see the aliens as that much of a threat. Otherwise, they would have announced it right after Roswell. I don't see how you could possibly rev up a society to fight some major threat like that by keeping it secret. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
No. The only thing I can think of is that they want to weaponize a lot of the technology, and that's why it's hush-hush. Yeah, and being deployed discreetly, as we were talking about earlier. But what is your advice to anyone who has alien implants? Any good advice?
Well, I would say that you should probably consider not taking them out if they're not giving you any problems. But if you do want to consider taking them out, then we're still in business. And I would say also to definitely join a support group and don't let anybody tell you that you're crazy. And this stuff is as real as it gets. It may be bizarre and out there compared to what we're taught, but it's as real as it gets, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And I'd like to say to you that if you have implants, then you're probably the cream of the crop as far as the aliens are concerned. They consider their abductees the best of humanity. And you probably have some really interesting genetics going on. And don't let anybody tell you that you're strange or weird or anything like that, because a lot of people will try to, but it's not true. They're the ones that have the problem.
I agree. Yeah. It's a big world out there and a big universe, so we better learn how to get along, right?
Yeah.
That includes off-worlders.
I agree.
And can you think of any shielding devices off of the top of your head that might be useful for, I think I might have mentioned this before, but I think you talked about moo metal. Is that right? Have you heard of it? Is it moo metal, or is there something you can use to kind of deflect maybe negative transmissions?
Well, scalar waves actually go through the material. They're like gravity waves. They go through material a lot more readily than ordinary transverse EM waves. And we actually, you and I actually tried an experiment trying to shield against them with graphite cloth, and that didn't work.
Not for me.
That was one of the best materials I could think of offhand.
I need a magneto helmet.
Yeah, you might try something ultra dense like lead or uranium or gold or something like that, but or maybe even layers of organic material with alternating layers of organic material with layers of dense metal. But I think that would be a difficult challenge. It would take some research. Right,
I'm going to have to get a special suit made. That's my mission, should I accept, right?
Yeah.
Along with a lot of other people, I'm sure.
Actually, a guy named Haktan that Roger used to know was a co-developer of a material that apparently shields against X-rays, and it's very light. I think it's some nanomaterial that deflects the X-rays outward or interferes them and reflects them somehow. And, maybe something like that might work.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
If you want, I'll ask them about that material and see if we can get samples.
If you could, that'd be awesome. Yeah, you know how to get a hold of me on that one for sure.
Yeah, the University of Ankara, I believe, developed that, and he was one of the co-developers.
Nice. Well,
he comes out here quite a bit for the UFO Congress.
Oh, good. Well, definitely. Yeah, let me know about that one. So what's your vision of the future concerning these implants and inductions? I know we're getting ready to wrap this up real quick, but what do you think the end game is?
As far as the aliens are concerned?
Or, well, let's talk about the aliens, and then let's talk about covert intelligence.
The end game, as far as covert intelligence is concerned, I don't think they have any end game. They want to keep things going in the status quo to get as much technology as they can. They have no plans to disclose, and they have too much to lose to disclose. And I think as far as the aliens are concerned, they are planning on, they probably are planning on, at least partially, repopulating the Earth with hybrids and Class II abductees, but they're waiting until whatever disaster happens to decrease the population size. And they're still perfecting the hybrids. They're in the last stages of perfecting the hybrids, and they're genetically modifying people as well that they abduct. And it's our working hypothesis that most Class II abductees are genetically modified. So there's a spectrum of hybridization, I guess you could call it, from genetically modified Class II abductees to straight-out hybrids that have a lot more alien DNA. They tend to be more caring, socially conscious, less violent people, and are highly intelligent and have a lot of creativity. The star beings that you mentioned, and the end game would be to see the Earth populated by mostly by them, and humanity be a more peaceful race and more harmony with nature, I suppose.
That would be a better world without a doubt. Look forward to something like that. And do you know if Roger had implants, by the way?
Well, now that he's dead, I guess I can talk about it. I mean, he definitely was an abductee. He told me about some experiences, strange experiences he'd had, like missing time and driving one time while he was apparently being telepathically fed visions of what the road was like ahead that turned out to be accurate.
Wow.
I don't know if he had implants or not. I never scanned him. He never wanted me to, probably because he knew I would find some.
Right.
But I suspect he did. He probably had the rather standard Class 2 abductee brain implant that enables them to monitor you 24/7.
Right. I know that one very well. Well, don't be surprised if he has a few clones out there, right? In a good way.
No, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Actually, anybody that's a unique, important individual that's in the program probably gets cloned.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that being said, it's been a pleasure to interview you tonight, Steve. I'm really, really happy you've been on the show, and thank you so much for the work that you do. I really appreciate it, and I know everybody else does as well.
Sure.
And it's so nice to talk with you, and thank you for the information you provided with us. It's very, very important that we all get on get up to speed on this information. So I do want to thank you. And also, are you writing any books? Did I ask if you have a book out coming out anytime soon or no?
Yeah, actually I am. I'm in the early stages of writing it at this point, but it's going to be a survival manual for Class 2 abductees, and it's going to talk about many people's abduction experiences and just general rules of thumb. It'll be a lot of the material that we've covered.
Excellent. All right.
Radio show and then some.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone, for listening. See you next week.
All right. See you soon.